Hello and welcome to the Rotoworld Baseball Show. My name is DJ Short, and with me here once again is Eric Samulski. This is the first episode in our annual position preview series as we get ready for 2024 fantasy baseball drafts. Yes, the time is nearly here. We'll cover every position, including starting pitchers and relievers, as we move through the month of February and spring training games get underway. And we'll begin today with a look at the first base position. And Eric, it's just so good to be talking about fantasy
Yeah.
baseball prep. I'm ready to go. How about you?
Yeah, I've been, getting into content and getting super, excited about it. It's one thing where you're covering like off-season moves and
Mhm.
it's kind of like it's still nice, but now getting into draft prep, it's just like it's a little exhilarating. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, so our online version of the Rotoworld Baseball Draft Guide will be coming out this week. The magazine should be hitting newsstands in the coming days too. So really exciting time. We're going to have our online draft guide updated throughout spring training. So definitely check it out. But we're hoping these podcast episodes can, be a great help to you as you get ready for your drafts and be something hopefully evergreen throughout spring training. So we'll start off at the top here kind of just talking about what changed this off season, and there's still some things to be determined. We'll get into that. But for me, I think the big headline at first base this off season is Bryce Harper. So
Sure.
he is no longer an outfielder. He didn't play in the outfield at all last year. The Phillies experimented late in the season with Bryce Harper at first base, and he held his own. He did well, and I think with a little bit more experience, he can only get better. But the Phillies announced during the offseason that Harper will be their full-time first baseman moving forward, and we'll
Mhm.
talk a little bit in a little while about where he fits in the dynamic and first base and fantasy leagues. But that's pretty big.
Yeah, it's definitely big. It adds even more value at the top end of the position.
Mhm.
I think we're getting, there are some guys who were injured last year who we're getting back, who you and I will mention in the later on in this podcast. And so I think that the depth of the position is kind of growing. I know that like the popular narrative going into last year was, oh, you could wait on first baseman. It's really deep. And some of those guys were like Rowdy Telez and Brandon
Mhm.
Belt and guys who didn't really deliver for us. But I think we can say it again going into this year. Like maybe you don't have to wait, but I think first base is deep. Also, the new stolen base rules carried over to first base.
Yep.
Last year, there were 13 first basemen who stole at least 15 bases. That
Yep.
number had been 8 in 2022. So you don't have to say, like, oh, Paul Goldschmidt gets me, more stolen bases than the average first baseman. So I need to draft him. There are more guys. And we also saw a lot more power just in general out of first baseman. There's always been the kind of high end power of the guys like Pete Alonso and Matt Olson, but we saw more 8 first basemen hit over 20 home runs last year. There had only been 4 who were primary first basemen in 2022. So again, just adding more depth across all 5 categories is something that is important.
So, breaking news on Tuesday, we're recording on January 30th, Tuesday, January 30th. Justin Turner reportedly headed to the Blue Jays on a 1-year, $13 million contract. He's first base eligible. Probably won't be playing first base on most days for the Blue Jays, of
Right.
course. Uh, Turner should mostly DH, but I'm sure he'll see some time at first base and third base as well. We'll probably talk about Turner in a little bit. So that's a notable deal fantasy wise. Rhys Hoskins joined the Brewers, which we like. We'll talk
Mhm.
about that. Jeimer Candelario goes to Cincinnati. We like that too. Kind of going deeper on the board, Joey Gallo to the Nationals, Rowdy Tellez to the Pirates. Deeper league relevancy, possibly, but not really someone who's in standard fantasy leagues going to be picking those guys, of course. So,
And
name,
Cody
yeah,
Bellinger still
yeah,
nowhere to go. We don't know.
yeah, yeah. We
Maybe
don't,
back
we
to the
don't know
Cubs.
yet. Yeah.
Feels like every week we don't get him signed. It just makes more sense that he goes back there. But who knows?
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I thought Rhys Hoskins would have been a great fit for the Cubs, but Now that he goes to a division rival there with the Brewers, I think Bellinger makes the most sense to return. We'll see. And if he does return, Matt Mervis probably blocked again.
Sure.
As of now, you're kind of like, maybe there could be something there again, but I don't know. It's contingent upon whether Bellinger returns. And right now, as I'm just kind of looking out there, it's hard for me to find a fit for Bellinger.
Right. And since we're talking about the Cubs also, even though he doesn't have first base eligibility right now, it looks like Michael Busch will be their starting first baseman, which means he would pick up first base eligibility. So for draft purposes, we'll talk about him later. And then also in a deeper leagues, Luke Raley went from the Rays to the Mariners,
right?
And looks set to be the everyday first baseman for the Mariners. So, additional playing time there. Or actually, I think they have him set up in the outfield with Ty France at first base. But again, an everyday player.
Right, who showed some flashes with the Rays last year. The Mariners have really transformed their offense this winter. Jorge Polanco, we'll talk about that in the second base episode. But Mariners have done some interesting things this offseason. You can argue whether it's enough, but they've certainly have made a bunch of wholesale changes in that lineup. We'll see what happens with guys like Brandon Belt, CJ Cron, Garrett Cooper, Gio Urshela. All of them are still out there in free agency. It's amazing how many free agents there are. They're still out there.
Wow.
And all those guys are capable of, in a deeper league, being useful. So we'll see where they wind up.
Carlos Santana, too.
Yeah. And so there's plenty. There's an amazing amount of players still out there in free agency. We'll get to our top 20 first basemen in a second. Before we do, Big Ten men's basketball on Tuesday. We have a double dip. That can only be streamed on Peacock. Illinois and Ohio State tip things off at 6:30 Eastern as each team looks to boost their big dance resume. Then at 9 p.m., another chapter of an in-state rivalry will be written when upset-minded Michigan takes on Michigan State in East Lansing. All this only on Peacock. I've got the Peacock hoodie today. I did not plan that. It's just pretty cozy.
It's just comfy. It's just comfortable.
It's just cozy. All right, so let's go through. Why don't we do this? We'll go 20 through 13 with our first base rankings to start things off, and then we'll go top 12. So I'll get started here. I have Justin Turner, the newly signed Justin Turner, at number 20 for me, and he bumped Nathaniel Lowe off my top 20 after signing the Blue Jays. I have Alec Boehm, number 19, primarily going to be a third baseman for the Phillies this year. He might not even have first base eligibility in 2025, but for 2024, he'll be first base eligible. Number 18, I have Spencer Steer. Number 17, Christian Encarnacion Strand. 16, Ryan Mountcastle. 15, Spencer Torkelson. 14, Yandy Diaz. 13, Rhys Hoskins. Eric, who's your 20 to 13?
So 20, I have Nate Lowe. 19, I have Justin Turner. I'm like looking at this right now. I skipped 18 on my sheet. That's terrible. There we go. 18, I have Christian Encarnacion Strand. 17, I have Jeimer Candelario. 16, I have Ryan Mountcastle. 15, I have Spencer Steer. 14, I have Spencer Torkelson, and 13, I have Vinnie Pasquantino.
Okay, so there were a couple of names that stood out to me based on recent average draft position. You were kind enough to pass along the last 2 weeks of average draft position, and Spencer Steer is interesting to me because he's going basically near the top 100 hits, right? After a year where he, all things considered, you look at the 5 category impact, he was a useful player. We're each a little lower on him than the consensus. What pushed you to drop him down a little bit on your board?
I think it's interesting because I don't know that it's dropping him down as much as I like some of those other options as first base options more. Like I personally wouldn't be drafting Spencer's tier 2 be my first baseman. I understand he's first base eligible. He's also outfield eligible, third base eligible, depending on like some of the your league rules. I think he probably fits better in some of those other spots. So I have him like a little below some guys who I think are more power friendly, and those are guys I would probably rather put in my first base position. There are some, I think the 15 stolen bases is great. It's way more than he's ever done at any level before. So is he more of a 10 stolen base guy, than 15? Who knows? The BABIP ran pretty high, so maybe he's more of a 260 hitter instead of a 270 hitter. I think that his, he doesn't hit the ball overly hard, with just a 6.7% barrel rate. But I think, a 44% pull rate, like that kind of stuff plays in that park. And obviously we know the park will increase a little bit of the batting average value. I think that him moving to the outfield makes him kind of free of this confusing playing time situation that I'm sure we'll talk about with some of the other Reds on this list. But I still don't know if it removes him fully, because there's still a lot of guys that could get some days here and there, with like Jake Fraley's not even in the lineup right now, so maybe he gets time there. We don't fully know. And he hit 16 of his home runs on pulled fly balls last year. He had 37 pulled fly balls, 16 of those went for home runs. Average exit velocity on those was 97, it's kind of like right in line, but he needs to kind of keep that approach in order to get to that power again. And there's no reason to think he can't, but it's just like, maybe he's a 2010 guy with a 260 batting average. And so I kind of just had him a little bit below some of the more power centric players.
So we've seen Spencer Torkelson go pretty high as well after that huge second half that he had. How much do we believe in it? Because it looks like from both of us that there's some skepticism about that second half output from last year.
It's funny. So I didn't view myself as skeptical. I thought ranking him 14th among all first basemen was pretty high.
Yeah.
And then I see, where he's currently going in ADP, with an ADP of 123, going rounds ahead, like significantly ahead of some of the guys that I thought he would be like naturally be ranked behind.
Right.
And so like, I like Spencer Torkelson. I'd be happy having him in drafts. The batting average is a concern for me. He hit 233 last year. Even in his really great second half, he hit 238. So maybe he's a 240 hitter with 30 home runs, and who won't really give you anything in terms of speed in a lineup that's getting better but isn't going to be great. So that will impact the counting stats a little bit. So I thought I was high on Torkelson. I like that he's super pull fly ball heavy, because I think that's going to help him get to that power in that park. But I don't know that there's much more than 30, 31, 32 home runs. Like, I wouldn't pencil him in for 35 pushing 40. So I don't know. I feel like, a starting first baseman in a 15-team league, or maybe on the fringe of a starting first baseman in 12, feels pretty good given the lack of average in stolen bases.
Right. I mean, I think that's the key. I don't expect the batting average to be there. It's not like he made strides in terms of like his contact rate or anything like that last season. The strikeout rate was the same. He doesn't run, and as you said, that matters at first base now. Like, even getting a little bit is helpful to keep the pace with the other managers in your league. So I could easily see, I mean, it's going to happen because it happens every year. A late round player will put up very similar stats and be a value compared to Torkelson. So I think he's respectable and fine. I do think that there maybe is a little bit of hype of people saying, well, the second half is a sign of things to come, and they want to get on that train before it happens.
Right. But even that, it's funny because, like, even if you think that, then it's a sign of increased power, which I think we're kind of giving him. But I don't think it's a sign of like more stolen bases or more, or a higher batting average. So I just think it's the really good second half built on top of the, he's young and he'll continue to get better, which we'll talk about later with some of the other guys who are ranked higher because they're young and they'll continue to get better. But the truth of it is also just that, like, it's not always how it works. And getting better doesn't necessarily mean like huge jumps in certain categories. Like sometimes it just kind of is who a hitter is.
Yeah, and Nathaniel Lowe fits into that category, right? So he had the breakout 2022. Last year kind of fell off a little bit, and you're asking yourself, like, what is the ceiling of a Nathaniel Lowe? Is he a 270 hitter with 15 to 20 homers, and like we're okay with that? Or is 2022 an outlier? To me, I'm more in the camp of 2022 was an outlier, but wonder where you think on that.
I think it's more 2022 was an outlier. I don't particularly see more power given his approach and his park. Nathaniel Lowe hit 15 pulled fly balls last year, all year. 5 of those led to home runs. His average exit velocity on his pulled fly balls is 92.5 miles per hour. So that doesn't speak to really great power. And it's kind of what I was also going to talk about with Torkelson too, is like, I have this article coming out on pulled fly ball rate, which will be out later in the week and will be in the Rotoworld online draft guide. So it's something you could definitely check out. But what I learned from that was, in looking at all the pulled fly ball rates and seeing how many, the average of home runs per pulled fly ball, guys who hit like around 50% home runs per pulled fly ball all had an average exit velocity of 98 miles per hour or over. Torkelson is 97.5. Lowe is 92.5. So both of those guys are at average or well below in terms of the amount of power needed to surpass 50% home runs per fly ball rate. Per fly ball. So that means a guy like Torkelson is going to need to really pull a lot of fly balls in order to hit home runs. We know that he did last year and will likely continue to. Lowe would need to pull way more fly balls because his average exit velocity is well below Torkelson, and he's not doing that. And so I don't, like, this is the argument again we'll make about another player later, but there's no real reason for Lowe to do that. If he wanted to do that, he would have done it already. Right? He's going to be a guy who's going to, spray line drives, try and hit 270, and, make a high level of contact. He has a really good walk rate. He works the zone. He is not, selling out for power. His pull rate in general was under 30% last year. So we can't just expect players like that to change what they do because we want them to. Right.
Or that it'll work for them.
Right. He's going to be a 270 hitter. He'll run into 15 to 20 home runs, and he's going to put up probably strong runs and RBI totals because he's hitting in the middle of a good lineup.
Good context for sure. And it was a debate for me between Turner and Lowe, because Lowe's been close to an Iron Man over the past 3 years. Justin Turner in his upper 30s at this point, primarily a DH, yes, but there's the health question there. I think as far as like net what you will get in the games that Turner plays, I think Turner will be better, but it wouldn't surprise me if Lowe was the, more, you're going to get the more cumulative stats over the course of the season that you can bank and not have to worry about.
Yeah. I think for me, it was that last year in Boston, we saw Turner change his approach in a way that benefited him, not just because of the park, but also because of his age.
Yeah.
In that he had his highest pull rate ever of 41%, and that helped him get to the power more.
Yeah.
He hits the ball much harder in the air to the pull side than Nate Lowe does. So I feel more confident in Justin Turner being a 20 21-22 home run hitter. And I think they're both, and also Justin Turner being a 270 to 280 hitter, just like Lowe. And I think the Blue Jays lineup is a little worse than the Rangers, but not much worse.
Yeah.
And Turner's contact profile was a little better. So I just felt like they were similar, but I felt a little bit more confident in Turner's average and a little bit more confident in Turner's power. And so despite the concerns about playing time, and it's, again, playing time based on health, somebody pointed out, I think, a good point that, like, he's now playing on turf, and he ended last year dealing with a serious foot injury, which could impact that. But also, like, he could DH, and then the Blue Jays could sprinkle him in at second every now and then, or at third every now and then, or at first every now and then. So there's still a way for him, as long as his body holds up, to get 500 plus plate appearances.
Sure. I was sort of into the Mets bringing him back.
I know a lot of people
arc.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the Mets are going to go with Mark Vientos as their primary DH. We'll see about that.
Which is what people wanted all of last year, and now they're upset that
now Mark Vientos is the most hated man on Mets Twitter today. Sorry, Mark. I was looking at the recent ADP that you sent along, and we each had Spencer Torkelson pretty in our top 15. We each had him in our top 15. Torkelson's ADP over the past 2 weeks is 123. If you waited a couple of rounds, there's Christian Encarnacion Strand, his ADP being 158 over the past 2 weeks. It's very plausible that Encarnacion Strand could outperform Torkelson this year. I think there are some concerns about the approach with Encarnacion Strand. To put it plainly, he hit 270 last year in a pretty good sample, 241 plate appearances, but he struck out 28.6% of the time. The approach definitely needs work. 69 to 14 strikeout to walk ratio, but the power's great. Quality contact is solid. Great situation as a slugger. I guess some question about how the playing time is going to shake out is the thing that's holding him back a little bit, but I think he's someone to be excited about.
Yeah, for me, it's playing time. I mean, I don't think that the profile, like you mentioned, like there are some swing and miss concerns. I don't think that he is like, he probably can hit for a higher average than Torkelson, even with the swing and miss concerns. He has equal, if not better, power, just in terms of raw power, and a much better home ballpark.
Yeah.
So if I felt confident that he was going to get a lot of playing time, I would have had him much higher on this list, and I might come spring. Again, we're going back to our pulled fly ball data, but Encarnacion Strand pulled 14 fly balls last year. 9 of them were home runs. They had an average exit velocity of 100.1 miles per hour. That's going to work anywhere, let alone in Great American Ballpark. My concern is that last week David Bell said Jeimer Candelario was an everyday player. Like, we signed him to be an everyday player. That means first base is basically Jeimer Candelario's. And so Encarnacion Strand can DH, and he can spell Candelario at first. Maybe the Reds also move Candelario to third some game so that Encarnacion Strand can play first. But the fact that David Bell has said Jeimer Candelario is going to be the everyday first base, or an everyday player. And then you see all the other prospects in that infield. Now I'm like, okay, how does it work? And it doesn't work for all of them. And we just don't yet know who is going to be the one that gets kind of left out. And that's also part of the reason why I have Jeimer Candelario where I do. I have him as my 17th first baseman, slightly ahead of Encarnacion Strand, where he's going much later in drafts. His ADP is 213 in drafts, and Encarnacion Strand is 158 right now. And for me, it's just, I feel like 600 plate appearances is within the cards for Candelario. I'm not entirely sure that's the case for Encarnacion Strand. And what's wild to me is that the projections don't seem to be giving Candelario any power boost, despite the fact that he's going to Great American Ballpark. He hit 35 pulled fly balls last year. Only 13 of them were for home runs. That's well below the league average on pulled fly balls. but he hit his pull fly balls 96 miles an hour. Like that should work. And I think that he could push 25 home runs in Great American Ballpark with a 250 to 260 average, hitting in the middle of a pretty good lineup. He also stole 8 bases last year, so maybe he gives you 5, which is again nothing amazing, but it still helps. And so I think Candelario is being underdrafted right now.
Oh, without a doubt. Spoiler alert here, I have Candelario as my number 12 first baseman, which I was surprised I talked myself into that one, but I love the situation. Like you said, I think his power will play nicely there. And if you toy around with Baseball Savant, there's that little section where it shows if a player played all their games in certain ballparks, what would the home run total be? Candelario, last year, he played in Great American Ballpark, he would have hit 30 home runs. So, I mean, I'm not expecting him to be a 30 home run hitter. I think I've always viewed him as more of like a doubles hitter. But in this situation, I think he could be 25 home run type of player with a good batting average, good counting stats. And like you said, he even stole some bases last year. So I'm going to read off my top 12 now, and then you can do the same. So like I said, Candelario, number 12 for me. Number 11, I have Vinnie Pasquantino. Number 10, Josh Naylor. Number 9, Christian Walker. Triston Casas, number 8. Number 7, Paul Goldschmidt. Number 6, Cody Bellinger. Number 5, Vlad Jr. Number 4, Pete Alonso. Number 3, Matt Olson. Number 2, Bryce Harper. Number 1, Freddie Freeman. What do you got?
I'm going to read off my top 12, and then I do want to make one comment about somebody we skipped in the section before. Skip discussing. But my top 12 are, my 12th is Josh Naylor. My 11th is Rhys Hoskins. My 10th is Yandy Diaz. 9th first baseman is Triston Casas. 8th is Christian Walker. I don't know where that was, like a weird Christian Stewart, like a Twilight thing. I don't know what I was. 7th is Cody Bellinger. 6th is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. 5th is Paul Goldschmidt. 4th is Pete Alonso. 3rd is Bryce Harper. 2nd is Matt Olson. 1st is Freddie Freeman. And I did just want to point out, both of us had Ryan Mountcastle ranked 16th. His ADP is currently 263. I posted something about him battling vertigo last year, and a lot of people seemed to have missed that last year. And so I think it's worth pointing out that he battled vertigo and was on the IL for over a month, and then was eased back into the starting lineup, and then wound up over the last 48 games. He hit 325 with a 906 OPS, 7 home runs, 28 runs, and 27 RBIs in 48 games. And so I don't think, like, the vertigo didn't obviously just start the second they placed him on the IL. He was obviously dealing with it before he went on the IL, then was on the IL for over a month, then was eased back in. But he's 26 years old. He showed he still has the ability to hit for both average and power, even in that park when he came back. He did not really have platoon splits heading into last year. And so I don't think, given, again, his battled vertigo, that we should just say, oh, he's going to sit versus righties. They were able to play him and O'Hearn at the same time. I still think they'd probably be able to do that given what they have at first base DH right now. And so I think that people are kind of writing him off based on his full year last year and not understanding the difference in how he produced when he was healthy.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. He even cut down on the strikeouts a little bit last year, which is nice to see. And the supporting cast there in Baltimore should be really good as well. I know the ballpark isn't what it once was, but his power really goes to all fields too. So I'm not too worried about Mountcastle. Actually, I agree with you. I think he can be a value in drafts this year. I want to look at the sort of the fringe of our top 12s here. I want to get your thoughts on Yandy Diaz and just what he is, because for a long time, like, you look at the guy and you're like, this guy should hit home runs. Like, just physically look at him. He is jacked. We know he's had a good approach at the plate for years. Finally added some power last season. The question is, and from a fantasy perspective, the most important question is, is the power sustainable? It seems like you think that it is.
I actually don't think that it
Interesting.
is.
Okay.
Well, I don't think that it is in a sense that I don't think he's a 22 homer hitter.
Okay.
I also don't think he's a 9 home run guy like he did in 2022. I think he probably settles closer to 15. But last year, he hit 12 of his 22 home runs in the first 2 months of the year. Even when he did that in the first 2 months, his average launch angle over that stretch was just 9.4 degrees. And he had a really unsustainable 23.5% home run to fly ball rate. From June 1st on, his launch angle fell to 3.9 degrees. He had just a 25% fly ball rate total. And he hit 10 home runs from June 1st on. So I think that power spike early was not real. And because it came even without a drastic shift in, add of like a drastic change in his lift or his launch angle. However, I think the batting average is incredibly real. I think the runs and RBIs are going to be good in still a strong Rays lineup. He's probably going to hit leadoff for them again. He scored 95 runs last year. I don't think there's any reason not to expect him to score 85 plus runs, and runs are an often overlooked category.
Sure.
I think him being a 290 hitter or better is also likely. So if I'm going to get a 290 hitter who's going to hit 15-ish home runs and put up probably more runs than any other first baseman, or among the league leaders at runs at first base, while also getting me 70 to 80 RBIs, I think that has value and is being overlooked because he doesn't hit a lot of home runs. Like, he will give you the best batting average among first basemen and potentially the best run total among first basemen.
Do you think Vinnie Pasquantino can be a similar type of player you can get later? I think Pasquantino can hit for more power than Diaz this coming year, and the approach is really good. He is coming back from shoulder surgery, so we'll have to see kind of how he looks in the spring and how he progresses throughout camp. But looking at his season last year, Pasquantino, he was hitting 298 with 7 home runs and a 922 OPS through his first 38 games. Things fell off dramatically from there. He had 167 over his last 23 games before having the shoulder surgery.
Right.
To me, that's kind of like, that's a flashing light saying something was happening here. And so I don't want to just look at the batting average for the full season, which was only 61 games, where he hit 247 and you're like, he was a bust. I don't believe that to be the case. I think he can be a better version of Yandy Diaz, although hitting in a different spot in the lineup. I kind of see them similarly. Wondering what you think.
I guess I don't see the average upside for Pasquantino at the level that I see it for Yandy Diaz. I think that Pasquantino is a 270, 280 guy. I don't think that Diaz was a fluke to hit over 300 last year. I don't want to project guys to hit over 300, but I think that like it's a fair bet for Diaz to push 300. I also think obviously the runs are going to be drastically different. And I don't know that even if Pasquantino hits in the middle of the lineup, he will hit for more RBIs on this Royals team than Yandy would hitting first for a much better Rays offense. Right. So I buy Pasquantino's power more. They both don't run. So I think Yandy is the better bet in 3 of the 5 categories. And so that's why I have him higher. I felt good about putting Pasquantino 13th. Again, his ADP is like, it's almost 50 picks after Spencer Torkelson.
Yeah.
And so I think that's people pushing for the power, right? The power of Torkelson. So let's say Pasquantino hits 20 home runs, and that's 10 fewer than Torkelson. I think that Pasquantino is still going to hit for a better average. I think they'll probably have around the same amount of runs. So maybe Torkelson is home runs and RBIs. I think they're I think they're pretty equally valued, and it depends on what you're going for from your first base spot based on the rest of your lineup. Do you want the average or do you want the power?
I was surprised in the course of this exercise to see how much I liked Josh Naylor. I
Yeah,
think going in, I was not real high on him. And maybe that's just the Guardians. Like there's the Guardians stink of their offense. um, but
sure.
no, I really liked what I saw from Naylor last year and impacting all. I won't say all five categories because the run score total was he scored 52 runs in 121 games, despite a 354 on base percentage, which is crazy. But lowered the strikeout rate down to 13.7%. Batting average appears to be for real. Had a 293 expected batting average last season. Also increased his fly ball rate. So power in that 20 homer range is a reasonable expectation. Full season of at bats gives you a little bit of speed. I think he's pretty underrated in this, especially because I didn't even going into it think that I liked him that much, but I really do.
Yeah. I think he's being underrated. I love him as like a, if I don't get my early first base targets, who do I feel good about taking to like, just be my starter? Um, you know, I think the batting average is legitimate. I think the 20 homer power, as you mentioned, is for real. The speed is nice. I don't really understand why Spencer Torkelson is going ahead of him, other
Mm.
than people wanting power,
Yep.
right? Like the Guardians' offense wasn't really particularly good last year, and Naylor still had 97 RBIs. So I
Mm-hmm.
think he's a pretty good bet for like 65, 70 runs and 85, 90 RBIs while potentially stealing 10 bases. And then, like, if you want to talk about power, well, Josh Naylor's average exit velocity on fly balls and line drives is 97.7 miles per hour. Spencer Torkelson's is 97.6 miles per hour. Josh Naylor's average exit velocity on just pulled fly balls is 96.9 miles per hour. Spencer Torkelson's is 97.1 miles per hour. So the difference is that Josh Naylor pulled 28 fly balls last year and Spencer Torkelson pulled 55%. So, and Josh Naylor actually hit more home runs per pulled fly ball than Torkelson did. So the only difference is Torkelson has a far more pull heavy approach. And now we don't know if, Josh Naylor will change that approach in any way, shape, or form. However, in the first half of last year, he pulled the ball 37% of the time. And in the second half of last year, he pulled the ball 44% of the time. So there's some indication that Naylor is becoming or was becoming more pull focused. And we just talked about why that might be good for his power. So would it surprise me if Naylor actually wound up popping like 25 home runs? Like, no, I think that's within his range of outcomes. And that to me is far more likely than Torkelson hitting like 270.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you on that. Sort of the power first baseman kind of rounding out our top 10. We had them flip flop. You had Christian Walker eighth, Triston Casas 9. I had Casas 8 and Walker ninth. So that's kind of interesting. I think Walker is one of the more underrated power hitters in the game. Like that's indisputable. You can bank on it. For me, I was a little more excited about the second half that Casas had. I think that he reached a new level, got comfortable. I think he's ready to take off.
Yeah, I think the easy answer to this is because I'm a Red Sox fan, I sometimes overcorrect and try not to overrank Red Sox. I think if I was in a draft, 100 times out of 100, I would take Triston Casas as my first baseman over Christian Walker. But I didn't feel I didn't want to like be a
just
use my fan bias. But I think Christian Walker is heavily underrated. I like what Triston Casas did, though. I wrote for Rotoworld, which you guys can all see on the website. I wrote an article about players with great plate discipline. And kind of like what that means for their fantasy profile and what we should glean from that. And Triston Casas was in there because we know he has elite plate discipline, and had like doesn't chase pitches out of the zone, doesn't really take called strikes, all that kind of stuff. What I thought was interesting was that Triston Casas, while people want him to pull the ball more, but he actually, his second half, he actually pulled the ball less, and still hit for more power, because his just average exit velocity on fly balls overall is 93rd percentile. So even though he can crush a pulled fly ball, he actually has a lot of exit velocity on all fly balls. And so I think that that all fields approach for him actually makes him a better overall hitter. It boosts the batting average. So maybe he's just a 25 to 30 home run guy, even though you look at like, dude, you're if you pull fly balls, you're hitting the ball 100 miles an hour. Like you could hit 40 in Fenway if you just pulled the ball. But then I don't know that the batting average comes with that. So that's one of those things where like, I'll take 270 with 27, 28, 29, 30 home runs. And I think that's kind of the hitter we want him to be. I don't think you want him selling out to pull so much.
So let's move over to an interesting disparity between you and I. So I had Paul Goldschmidt 7th at first base. You had Cody Bellinger 7th. I had Cody Bellinger 6th. I kind of struggle with this one too, because Bellinger is such an enigma to me. And even last year when he had a resurgence, the contact rate was nice to see an improvement there for sure. 26 home runs, 97 RBIs, 20 steals, 95 runs scored. Just, 5-category stud. But the secondary or the advanced metrics as far as quality of contact didn't really back up what he did. So Bellinger was 28th percentile in barrel percentage, 21st percentile in average exit velocity, 10th percentile in hard hit percentage. And Goldschmidt, who fell off from the MVP campaign, his quality of contact is still basically in the elite range of hitters. So I still put Bellinger higher because I do like the speed. He's younger. Goldschmidt's going in his age 36 season, but you could certainly make a case that Goldschmidt should be higher.
I think of my ranking here as less being down on Bellinger and more being back in on Goldschmidt. And I have Goldschmidt in my rankings. You say I have Goldschmidt higher than Vlad Jr. I really do think they're close. And I think that I understand people would say, Vlad is younger and on the way up and he could improve, and Goldschmidt is older and on the way down and he's, not likely to get better. And so I guess when push comes to shove, like I might flip those rankings, because I think I'd probably I know I would take Vlad over Goldschmidt. They're also going at a massive pick difference, and we'll get to that in a second. But where I'm at with Goldschmidt is like, yes, he hit 25 home runs last year, and he had a 268 average, and he had his lowest pull rate since 2015. So some people are connecting that to bat speed, but Goldschmidt historically had been a guy who used the whole field. His max exit velocity was basically the same as 2022, just slightly worse. And his average exit velocity on pulled fly balls was 100.5 miles per hour, which is actually harder than Matt Olson and only slightly behind Yordan Alvarez. So when Goldschmidt pulls the ball, he's still hitting it at kind of like peak 30 homer potential. He still has plus plate discipline and solid swing strike rates. He isn't really swinging and missing more. So maybe he's not a 300 hitter anymore, but maybe he's a 280 hitter. And I think the 25 home runs, he bumps that up to like 28, 30. And I still think he's running. So he's a 10 stolen base guy to me. So like 280, 28, 10 is really not, it's better than what you got from Vlad Jr. last year. And so I understand people are saying that's a down year for Vlad. That's fine. Like I said, I would probably take Vlad over Goldschmidt. But what I'm saying is there's not that level of a gap. And I also feel that way about Bellinger, is like Bellinger his average exit velocity on pulled fly balls is 93.9 miles per hour. That is the same as Donovan Solano, Taylor Walls, Richie Palacios. That's
all first round picks.
Yeah, that's not great. If you want to include line drives, his average exit velocity on pulled fly balls and line drives is 94.5 miles an hour, which is the same as Tyler Freeman, Oslevis Basabe, Miguel Andujar, and Hunter Renfroe. So like aging power hitter. But what I mean by that is like I think he earned, I don't know that he earned all of those 26 home runs.
For sure.
I think maybe he's a low 20s guy. Maybe he goes to 22, 23. And I think, as you mentioned, the batting average probably comes down a little bit. So you're looking then at Bellinger as like a 22 homer hitter with a 260 batting average who will steal more bases than Goldschmidt. But until we know that lineup context, like, I don't know if I can pencil him in for, 95 runs and RBIs like he got last year. And also, like, shouldn't the Cardinals be a better team than they were last year? Like, theoretically, shouldn't they? I mean, they still have talent.
Yeah.
And even in a down year, Goldschmidt had 90 runs and 80 RBIs. So that's not really far off of what Bellinger was doing.
So you were alluding to the difference in average draft position. So over the past 2 weeks, Paul Goldschmidt's ADP is 75, Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s is 31. And we're not used to seeing Vlad being this low on the board anyway,
Right.
and there's still a huge difference here. We should talk about the state of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. So last year he had 264, which is kind of striking. We're thinking about him being this, what he did in 2021. He hit 311, but otherwise he's been kind of underwhelming in terms of batting average. At 272 as a rookie, 262 in 2020, 274 in 2022, and then last year 264. Like, who is the real Vlad Jr.? Because the quality of contact tells you batting average should be higher. It's not like he strikes out a ton. So, like, what is going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think for so many reasons, it appears clear to me that 2021 is an outlier year. In addition to the stats being so drastically different than anything he's ever done in the minors or the majors, also because they played in Dunedin and Buffalo. Dunedin is a hitter-friendly park. They moved to Buffalo in the summer when that becomes a much more hitter-friendly park, because if you know anything about weather in Buffalo, March and April are not particularly balmy. But, then when you get to kind of like June, July, August, the ball actually does carry out of that park better. And so he hit in more hitter-friendly environments and had unsustainable, homer to fly ball rates. I think this is who I was alluding to earlier when I kept saying, oh, well, people say, well, he's younger and he can change things. Yeah. And it's like, sure, he can. He has never posted a fly ball rate in the majors over 36%. Yeah. He has never posted a ground ball rate in the majors lower than 45%. That's in 5 seasons. Yeah. Why do we think all of a sudden after 5 years he's going to drastically change who he is as a hitter? He has never had an average launch angle over 10.5 degrees. So, but he still barrels the ball. He hits the ball hard. He should hit better than 264. I think that he's a 280 hitter. Yeah. And I think he's a 280 hitter who can get to 30 home runs with his current approach. So why would you want a guy who's a 280 hitter, doesn't really strike out, makes good contact, to change his approach and swing type so that he could potentially hit for more home runs? If he adds more lift, you see a lot of hitters who add more lift than add more swing and miss to their game, right? Joey Votto being like the prime case, and a lot of others have followed suit. So if he becomes a 35 to 40 home run hitter, then is that going to be with a 260 average? Does that strikeout rate then kind of bump up to like 20%? Why would I want him to do that? Right. So I just think we're projecting changes to a guy just because he's young, when I don't necessarily know that makes sense based on the player and the type of player that he is. Do I think he could hit more than 26 home runs? For sure. Hits the ball very hard. If he pulls the ball slightly more, maybe, he gets to 30 more confidently. I think putting him down for 30 home runs and a 280 average with 5 stolen bases, 5, 6, 7 stolen bases makes a lot of sense to me. That's what I said I think Paul Goldschmidt will do.
Right.
So
yeah, I think it's I mean, what the plus side is that the ADP is lower than we're used to, so it becomes more justifiable to take a chance, and I think the floor is relatively safe.
For sure.
I had it. Unfortunately, the clock's ticking, so we're gonna have to scoot out of here soon. But I did want to compare Matt Olson and Pete Alonso real quick. Of course, Matt Olson had this amazing season last year at 54 home runs. I was all in on Matt Olson last year just based on the elite quality of contact. I thought he was going to have a bounce back. He did in a big way. I don't really buy him as a 283 hitter though, given that the strikeout rates settle in the mid 20s. Hits a lot of fly balls. I'm just nitpicking here. He's elite for sure. But then you contrast with Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso had 217 last year, had a 205 batting average on balls in play.
Right.
He's 279 in 2022, 274 in 2021. The strikeout rate was up last year, to be sure. Also dealt with a hand injury in the middle of the season, which I think impacted some of the production that we saw from him. You could wait around later and get Pete Alonso. It's very possible that they end up having similar seasons this coming year. I think they're almost, to me, when I'm just looking at the pure math and what's likely to happen, I think they're almost interchangeable.
Right. And so this is like Pete Alonso's going 26 and Vlad Jr. is going 31. I'm taking Pete Alonso every single day without question.
Right.
I do prefer Matt Olson a little bit in the sense that I believe we have seen Matt Olson have stretches where the contact rate really improves.
For sure.
He did it. I believe it was the end of 2021, like the second half of that year. And so I know people are like, well, 283, that's never going to happen again. And maybe it doesn't, but like 270 can. Yeah. And sure, 54 home runs is aggressive. But like to your point about how unlucky Alonso got, I also like in my pulled fly ball article found out that Pete Alonso pulled 46 fly balls, only 18 went for home runs. That means 39% of his pulled fly balls went for home runs. The league average was 40%. So Pete Alonso, who hits the ball 100 miles an hour when he pulls it, had below league average home runs on pulled fly balls. That it will not happen next year. It was horribly unlucky. If I feel like I need a first baseman at the end of the third round in 12 and 15 team leagues, I would take Alonso over Vlad Jr. And just in the talking about Olson, I went back and forth between Olson and Bryce Harper. I know you had Harper higher. I think at the end of the day, I probably move Bryce Harper a little bit higher than Olson because of the stolen base component as well. And I think the power will continue to come back. So that's like one little adjustment that I'm making on the fly in my rankings.
Yeah, I mean, you have to just, if you look at there was an initial struggle for Harper after coming back from Tommy John way earlier than anyone expected, but 18 home runs over his final 68 regular season games, 5 through 13 postseason games. I think I think Bryce Harper should be the favorite for the MVP going into this season. I know Acuna was amazing, but if you want to do an early futures play, Harper's the guy for me this coming season. And we're not going to have a ton of time to talk about Freddie Freeman, but I love to see him get his flowers. His ADP is in the top 10. It should be. He's just like the guy you can set your watch to and who doesn't get enough appreciation. But man, I love Freddie Freeman.
He's great. Nothing wrong with him. You have a pick in the back part of the first round. Take him.
Absolutely. So we love Freddie Freeman. I have nothing negative to say. But again, we didn't get to talk about him as much as we would have liked because we're running out of time. But I promise, Freddie, we love you, man. And if I'm late in the first round, I am absolutely going for it. Just a couple of young players I wanted to mention here to keep an eye on. Kyle Manzardo with the Guardians.
Mm-hmm.
If he gets a shot here, came over in the trade with Aaron Savali with the Rays last year. Interested to see what he can do. Kind of fell off a little bit in the first half last season in the minors, had an injury, but I think he's someone who could pop and be on the opening day roster. Nolan Shanuel with the Angels as well. I don't think there's a lot of power there, but really impressive approach at the plate. I think in a deeper league, he makes some sense as well. But unfortunately, we got to wrap things up now. We'll have a lot more to come in the weeks ahead. We'll preview second base next time. Before we go, remember, you can stream back-to-back Big Ten basketball games on Wednesday night. Indiana starts the party at 6:30 Eastern when the Lady Hoosiers take on Maryland in College Park. Then in the nightcap, Caitlin Clark and Iowa hit the road for a date with Northwestern at 8 p.m. Watch both conference showdowns exclusively on Peacock. Remember, you can find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to Amazon.com/NBC Sports. Follow us on Twitter or X if you don't already. Eric is at Samsky NYC. I'm at DJ Short. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time.